Well, today is a new day, everybody, which means not only we can able to experience some more micro games, and it's all thanks to about the fact that the new stage has been unlocked, which appears to be Jimmy T himself. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Jewel here, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos once again. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of WarioWare D.I.Y, or if you lived in European countries, it's simply called WarioWare Do-It-Yourself, for specifically for the Nintendo DS. So, yesterday, we did somehow manage able to boot up the game for the first time, and able to actually only access to the first stage in a game, which appears to be Mona stage, which focuses on strange category when it comes to micro games themselves. And speaking of which, not only did we somehow manage able to went into not one but 3 runs during the involvement of in a Mona stage of its entirety, not only for trying to able to actually get interrupted by some tutorial stuff, but in addition to that, we also did manage able to make ourselves the only custom-made micro game we somehow got, which I won't mention though right away. It just feels a bit kind of meh to me with my drawing skills, so I have no choice but to delete that. But that's mainly because no matter what though, I just want to get the tutorial stuff out of the way before you're able to actually dive into the main swing of things, which is of course the micro games themselves made by Nintendo officially. So because of that, and speaking of micro games themselves, we did indeed manage to able to actually access to every single micro games in Mona stage, usually for about 18 micro games to be more specifically, well, aside from the forms of the missing boss micro game, just because there's not enough room for the shelf, which means about the fact, as I explained this to you before, the only way you can able to experience boss micro games these days with this game, alongside with the WarioWare counterpart, is that we have to go through the entire stage as normal. So because of that though, kind of strange decision right there, but regardless of such though, everything else will become to expect. So today, for this video, is that we are about to be jumping into the next stage, which if you couldn't tell from the actual thumbnail, or potentially speaking of in the actual description down below, today we're now going to be experiencing the second stage, which focuses on Jimmy T, which as far as I'm aware, much like the evolves of how it does it in WarioWare Inc. Minigame Mania, the actual category for Jimmy T is all about sports. So this means about the fact that we might come across into some sports like golf, table tennis, and bowling especially, and much more. So as a result though, again, we will try our best if we're able to actually gather every single micro games on this entire stage. So wish me luck, I suppose, especially considering for the fact that we might able to actually do you know, multitude of runs, for the sake of the forms of trying to able to go through not only high scores, but in addition to trying to able to actually get every single micro games as possible. So either way, without further ado, let's jump straight into this. So either way, again, I do apologize for that particular tongue twist in the end, folks, because it has been about quite a few hours since I actually have last played this, especially because, like I said before, in order to able to actually unlock more stages though, we have to go from day-by-day basis, because as far as I'm aware, that we can't normally cheese this by simply trying to able to actually set the calendar up, because otherwise though, that might actually be, well, it's hard for me to explain really, because as you can tell, it's on to a pretty rough start, as you can see, but that's just mainly because no matter what though, that I was expected to able to realize about the fact that you have to concentrate at the same time, in regards to the forms of trying to go for those micro games. But no matter what though, it's about the fact that there's nothing else going on, in terms of storytelling, because as far as I'm aware, that the actual main plot is pretty simple and self-explanatory, that basically though, as you probably already expect, that Wario did somehow manage to able to come across into himself. Well, to be more accurate though, Dr. Krygor has a brilliant plan to able to actually bring up a custom-made, or should I say, a fan-made micro games, all thanks to the forms of the Super Maker Matic 21, and, you know, all the while Wario did turn up, able to realize he did manage to bring his broken TV, and you get the idea for this point. Although, I should point out about the fact that there's nothing else to it in terms of the forms of character development, as far as I'm aware, because we do already realize about the fact that Penny she did manage to able to turn up as a cameo, and no matter what though, about the fact I think she's going to be one of the hosts in terms of some modes of WarioWare D.I.Y, specifically on the DS version anyway, just because no matter what though, it's about the fact that, again, as far as we can able to expect, that I will try my best when it comes to the forms of the whole entire Let's Play of WarioWare D.I.Y to try to combine not only the DS version, but also the WiiWare at the same time, so that way we can able to like, you know, experience the whole entire thing in regards to the forms of not only different micro games, but in addition to different control schemes. So, but I digress. So as you can tell, the first run is pretty rough for Jimmy T, but that's just mainly because, as you can tell, the actual theme this time around for Jimmy T was actually by the forms of fitness style, which means about the fact that yes, much like the forms of how it does it on some WarioWare games in particular, like for example though, in WarioWare Inc. Minigame Mania, that we're able to actually expect to come across into ourselves some theme songs in their respective stages. Like for instance though, in Cat's stage, that we might able to actually hear the theme song while experiencing the microgames themselves, and another one of those examples being in WarioWare Twisted, that usually in Mona's Pizza, that you can able to actually listen to Mona's Pizza while at the same time, you can able to actually go into the actual microgames themselves, and all the while another one of those examples being WarioWare Touched for the DS, where basically though we might able to hear Ashley's song, and in WarioWare Smooth Moves we're able to actually hear Tomorrow Hill theme from the likes of Dribble and Spit stage in WarioWare Smooth Moves, and now we can able to actually hear the theme song in Journey Forms within Jimmy T stage. So as a result, I'm not entirely sure what the theme song is called, by the way, because again, it's been a very long time since I've experienced this. So anyway, here's the boss stage in Jimmy T right here, which involves around you play billiards or snooker, and it's your job to able to actually try to sink the actual red ball in, but if you couldn't tell, my skills are pretty much useless, but that's just mainly because no matter what though, I will have to admit though right away, that boss microgame to me is kind of annoying, just because no matter what though, it's all down to RMG, in regards to the forms. It doesn't really matter if you're trying to able to aim the actual white ball for that red ball, if you couldn't tell, but most of the time though, you might bump all over the place and there's no point of stopping. So because of that though, you're just continuously going back and forth in between any other like sides of the actual pool table. I mean, no matter what though, it's about the fact that there is one particular microgame I'm always suck at, which we'll get to more details about that until specifically on next Sunday, because as you probably already expect, that yes, today's date of course there is the 15th of June today, in some cases in 2025 today, so naturally speaking this might actually be the last day of the first half of June of 2025, and by that time until tomorrow, we are now approaching onto the second half of the month of June month of 2025, and sure enough though, like we've already established that before, since that when Maxi has already on about it, basically though we are almost getting close towards at the very end of the first half of 2025 as a whole. So either way, so yeah, relatively speaking out, everything else checks out there. Apart from the fact that one thing I will generally have to admit to though right away, I'm very pleased about the forms of how Nintendo Switch 2 actually looks like to be, because no matter what though, according to the forms of the actual sales data report, that recently, in just about a couple of days ago, basically though, recently, in 4 days, that the Nintendo Switch 2 has sold over 3.5 million units worldwide, officially in becoming the fastest selling Nintendo system of all time. And I was like, okay, this is actually a good start, especially concerning for the fact that how lackluster the Wii U sales can be. So no matter what though, I'm sure enough that the Switch 2 will be a massive step up compared to the forms of how it does it for the Wii U sales. So as a matter of fact though, it will be a little bit more efficient, because you know, after the events of when, you know, Nintendo Switch 1 is a huge success back then, so it might be generally be surprised about the fact that if Nintendo Switch 2 were able to actually continue the momentum for the sake of the actual game sales or unit sales, for the sake of the forms of the actual systems themselves or something. So anyway, oh yeah, and by the way, something's worth noting for that when it comes to the forms of Jimmy T stage itself in WarioWare D.I.Y, I think, relatively speaking though, this might actually be the only stage, in terms of the forms of the whole entire game, that the speed up does not appear after when you come across into a boss stage. So because of that though, because after all, unlike the previous stages, or specifically unlike the bonus stage, in addition to the future stages coming up. Basically though, the speed up will able to actually occur if you continuously try to progress onto how many microgames you encounter. So either way, chances are though is about the fact that we can able to expect how the fact that sometimes though, you get the idea what I was expecting for that point. So anyway, also keep that in mind though, since in Journey Evolves around 3 days ago, there's actually this very unexpected update has recently brought up for the likes of Sonic Dream Team. And what do I mean by that? Well, you remember how about the fact that with both Sonic Dash, alongside with the forms of Sonic Forces Speed Battle, that basically though you were able to actually unlock some cosmetic costumes for certain characters like Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Shadow, Cream, Rouge, and Amy. Well, it seems to be more specifically than that recently though, Sonic Dream Team has recently revealed there's going to be some more updates, specifically alternate character outfits. And as a result, it already came up since, you know, 3 days ago, and that's actually pretty interesting while you're able to actually change into its different cosmetic costumes for some characters in a 3D platforming game with Sonic and Crew, which is pretty cool, I must say. And on the subject when it comes to the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog in mind, well, there are some key factors in terms of the forms of, well, let's just say if you do manage to able to actually access to the Season Pass of Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. So, for instance though, about the fact that only Sonic characters will have rival voice lines and not the DLC ones, unfortunately, because it will be interesting if they do have unique character dialogue, depending on what DLC you get. So as a matter of fact though, it seems it's kind of weird they will actually not have that feature. That said, they've recorded more lines, or recorded more lines than for action games. So, logically though, there's going to be a lot of emphasis on dialogue heavy when it comes to Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. And in addition to that, Sonic Riders developers are in, because obviously Extreme Gears is now a thing. And in addition to that, still polishing the car physics, meaning about the fact that it took a bit some time to able to actually polish up the forms of the momentum with the forms of, you know, driving the car or vehicle for that matter. So, chances are though is about the fact, I'm sure enough though, once the game is finally finalized, by that time until September rolls around, then exponentially though, well, depending on what version of the game you get, likely for the PlayStation 4 or Xbox One or PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X/S, even PC Steam, as well as Nintendo Switch 1, because for what I've also heard about the fact that the Switch 2 version might come later on, because chances are though is about the fact that luckily though, that game was not on a game keycard release, because if it does, that means it gives us a lot of disadvantage in regards to the forms of obtaining the game physically for Switch 2. So yeah, you get the idea for this point. So, oh, don't you dare. Ah! Come on! Ah, you kidding me? Ah, not a big fan of that one. But I digress. Well, luckily though about the fact that the entire microgame itself is, you know, super duper short and everything, and I get the horrible feeling I am generally missing one last microgame, which, that's always the case, but either way, we've gotten very close, especially concerning for the fact that, after all, we've almost caught up in terms of the forms of our current record for the sake of the forms of bonus stage, but either way, I suppose this is now technically the 4th and possibly the final run of the forms of Jimmy T stage, because sometimes though, you will never know of what specific microgame you will come across into at one point. So, anyway, there's also another new thing that has been added to specifically Minecraft, and that's what it appears to be for the fact that, well, apparently though, Minecraft is about to be getting the How to Train Your Dragon DLC add-on, which I suppose the reason why that exists to go alongside with the release of the most recent live-action movie, which is of course How to Train Your Dragon with the same name as the 2010 film, but the noticeable differences being is of course the visual style and you name the rest. So, logically though about the fact that I'm still very curious to check it out, but for what I've heard about anything else for that particular film in mind, I've heard so many good things about it though, which no matter what though, despite the fact that the actual box office records hasn't been addressed yet, but I will let Maxie will point it out, whenever he goes back on experiencing Paper Mario, because at that point in time, he's getting very close towards the end of Paper Mario before that particular Let's Play will be now finally concluded. So, you have no idea about the fact that how long this will take, especially because, well, so far, in Journey Evolves been 2025 so far, that we've only come across into, I would say, 8 Let's Plays or 9, although I think I've lost count on that, but I'm sure enough that we'll let Joy or Maxi, for that matter, will mention more about it by that time specifically until next week. So anyway, alright, let's not mess this up. There we go. What I thought was a little bit odd, though, is about the fact that with any other sound effects in this game, they are obviously attempt to reuse some of these sound effects from the Super Mario Bros. Games, which is kind of odd considering. Well, mind you, about the fact that during around that time in America and Europe, that it did came out in 2010, which is roughly the exact same year as when Nintendo was expecting to able to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise, which as a result, same applies with the forms of Super Mario Galaxy 2, which as a result though, that particular discussion can wait during a later time though, especially because considering for the fact that after all, Super Mario Galaxy 2 has already became 15 years old now, which gee, time flies. So, anyway, oh, and another thing too, about the fact I also discovered something, with the forms of the Super Meat Boy 3D, it's going to be on, well let's just say, on next generation of consoles, specifically on PC, alongside with the forms of Xbox Series X/S, including PlayStation 5. I believe the release date for the game was expected to be releasing until in early 2026, so yeah, that's as far as I can try to describe it. Well, the only thing I'm a little bit unsure of is about the fact that if there's going to be a Nintendo Switch 2 version of the game, which time will definitely tell though, because at this point in time, we're still on the forms in the earliest stages, in terms of the forms of, you know, Nintendo Switch 2 have recently came out and stuff like that, so yeah, you get the gist of it. So, and aside from all that stuff though, that's as far as we can able to say, in terms of the forms of today's discussion, I'm afraid. I mean, sure, no matter what though, about the fact that there are some interesting stuff I would like to address something, but either way, we'll let Maxi will mention more about it during the forms of it tomorrow, or probably during the forms of the rest of the forms of next week, in between. So, and also something worth noting for is about the fact that with the forms of that particular, let's say the actual touchscreen transition thing, basically that was about the fact that you can able to actually just let Jimmy T became a dance groover or the fitness guy, which as a result, yeah, you get the idea what I was expecting for that point. So anyway, in terms of the forms of the boss microgame, as far as the actual naming of the actual boss microgame is actually called, the actual boss microgame is actually going to be called Reflecting, which I'm not exactly sure why that's the case, but obviously your objective is pretty simple. You have to simply just let the red ball in a corner pocket. So that's basically how I can really think about it in terms of the actual microgame description for it. So, because then again though, in order able to experience the boss microgame though, is that you have to play for the actual stages themselves. So, but yeah, everything else would be come to expect basically. So anyway, there's also reassuring about this too, about the fact that at this point in time, that I'm pretty concerned about the fact that in regards to the forms of something else I would like to explain to you all, and that's what appears to be for the fact that recently though, Mario Kart World has even got even more reviews just recently, and so far in Metacritic, it did somehow receive the game, as in for critics wise, it did receive the game as in 87% out of 100, so it's a little bit lower in comparison to, like, let's just say, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, at least as far as I can recall, but at least on the plus side is though, with Mario Kart World, it certainly did a lot better review scores compared to the forms of how it does it for Mario Kart Tour, but that's just me, and so much to the point, yeah, that's as far as I can try to describe it. But either way, again, we'll let Maxi mention more about the review scores update in terms of Mario Kart World in a later time. So for now, I'm pretty sure we've actually gathered every single microgames for Jimmy T right now. So, for instance though, we actually come across into ourselves Micro Golf, Offense, Valley Girl, Goal in 1, Spare Me, Swing Batter, Sink and Swim, Pumped Poser, and Alpine Lanes, and in addition to Pass Shoot, Get Some Air, Dardesty, and in addition to On Your Mark, and Glove Hurts, Kicking It, Hurdling On, Served, Smooth, and I think that's as far as I can try to describe about the forms of those micro games names for the likes of the forms of Jimmy T stage as a result. So, now I'm pretty sure no matter what though, I think we are getting very close to the well, the halfway point in terms of the DS version of WarioWare D.I.Y. already, and so much to the point, only 3 more stages to go, at least as far as what I've noticed anyway, just because no matter what though, as far as I'm aware, the bottom 2 is going to be most likely the Shuffle and Ultra Hard mode, I would like to say for this point. So with that being said folks, is that we get endings of this point right here. So join me next time for some more of Let's Play of WarioWare D.I.Y. or WarioWare Do-It-Yourself for the Nintendo DS version, is that we're about to be jumping into the next stage, which if I can recall correctly, the next stage is going to be Ashley next. So this will be interesting. So I'll see you guys until next Saturday. Later fellas.